Good morning. Welcome to Dress for Success Toronto's Mastering the Job Search Through a Pandemic virtual conference. My name is Kate Green, and I'm the Executive Director for Dress for Success Toronto. This is our third year running Mastering the Job Search workshop, but the first time hosting completely virtual, and the first time we have a new topic. At the peak of the pandemic, more than 8 million people were receiving the Canada Emergency Response Benefit. Nationally, the unemployment rate peaked at 13.7% in May of last year. The unemployment rate in the City of Toronto heading make up just under half of all paid workers, but account for 2/3 of all job losses. We're here to help change those statistics and support women in their journey to career success and economic independence. Employment changes the trajectory of a woman's life and enriches the life of her family and those in our community. This week will consist of a series of 5 60 to 90-minute workshops focused on how to effectively job search in these unprecedented times. These virtual workshops will provide you with the tools and resources you need to master your own job search. So whether you're currently searching for a job or if you're employed and looking to expand your career, there's something here for everyone this week. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our sponsors and make this conference possible. Thank you to our event sponsors, BMO Capital Markets, Mackenzie Investments, and Torstar. Thank you to all our session partners from LHH, Crowe Soberman, the Humphrey Group, Accenture, and Indeed, and to all of our wonderful add-on support partners, Mars Canada, ICF Toronto Chapter, and Toronto Crew. Without the support from all our partners, our volunteers, and our fabulous staff team, this week's event wouldn't be possible. Thank you. It now gives me great pleasure to kick off our first day and introduce you to our keynote speaker, Heather McCrory, CEO, North and Central America of Accor, joined by our very own Cassie Luters, our volunteer and program manager, who will be moderating the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Kate. I really appreciate that intro. And I'm thrilled to be here this morning to speak to all of you and have this opportunity to kick off what sounds like it's going to be a phenomenal week in the Mastering Your Job Search. And not only is it mastering your job search, but it's doing it through a pandemic, which is without a doubt, puts a little bit more of a twist on things. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I know the team at Dress for Success has done a phenomenal job of putting together a program for you that is going to be very motivating, and I think you're really going to enjoy the next few days of this particular program. And because of that, I don't want to be the one who's responsible for putting us behind schedule, so I'm going to dive right into our conversation today and talk a little bit first about my past and my history and how did I get to be where I am today quite quickly, and then go into the 5 areas that I call them, and I thought about this for this particular group, but I'm calling it the 5 R's, and we'll talk about those as what I think you need to do in order to work successfully through this pandemic and finding a role. So let me tell you a little bit about myself first. We go way back. I was born and raised in a town just outside of Toronto in Ancaster. I grew up with a immigrant dad who landed in Canada, 18 years old, $100 in his pocket with a hard work ethic. And he married my mom, who is a nurse. And I grew up my entire life out in Ancaster, went to Mohawk College, which many of you probably know. And then back in those days, it still actually happens, went on a work term out to Banff Springs Hotel in Alberta. And the rest, as they say, is history in terms of my career, because it's been almost 40 years now. And I have spent working for various companies throughout, but started my career in the laundry. And so best job I ever had. It was so much fun, first of all, so that makes it fun. But also I learned some things about that particular job. So I learned that engagement, enjoying what you do, having fun, but being productive is incredibly important. I learned that productivity is incredibly important. When you're making the beds for an 800-room hotel and doing all of the laundry, productivity is a very important part of it all. And I also learned that timelines and schedules and that whole productivity piece of the equation is what really makes these big buildings tick. And so it's so important in the long run. Didn't know I learned it at the time, but I definitely did. I then spent some time moving through my career in hotels, coming up kind of through the ranks in sales and marketing, and I spent some time at corporate office. And for about the next 20 years, I spent time in sales and marketing. And again, learned some very, very valuable lessons there on if you don't have top line revenue, if you don't have revenue, it covers a lot of ills, and it really drives the business. And so it's really important that you have revenue. And so that piece of the puzzle was interesting for revenue management, and so profitability and really driving the business. We call it heads and beds in the hotel industry, but that's a critically important part of the business. And then like many do, took a bit of a left turn. Some say I went to the dark side, but I moved over from sales and marketing into operations. Spent another approximately 10, 15 years in operations. For many of you on the phone or on the call today, you'll know that I spent my first 6 years in operations at one of my favorite hotels, which is the Fairmont Royal York, downtown Toronto. I was a general manager and regional vice president there, and then came back to corporate office about 10 years ago, and have kind of moved up through the ranks from SVP, EVP to CEO, which I have been now for the last couple of years. And so managing through a pandemic, which frankly, after the first 8 months of my job in this newest role, was incredible. There's so many things that I learned during that period. But the things that I thought were most pertinent to this conversation today, and to things that I think that are good takeaways in my mind anyway, that would be helpful for all of you, is 5 things. And I referenced it earlier. It's the 5 R's. And so they are, in my mind, resiliency, and I'll talk a little bit of each one of these as I go. Research, being reliable, being relentless. And then I put these 2 together, although you could argue it's 6 R's, but be real and relax. And I think those are incredibly important pieces of your job search, or looking, even if you have a job today and want another job. I think it's really they're keys. And so why? Resiliency is the one that I think is in this pandemic time frame, probably one of the most important pieces. You have to be able to bounce back. You have to be able to say, okay, how do I just keep going through no matter what? And it is, and you know what? As much as, and I can talk about the devastation to the hotel industry, but the good news is it's coming back. I am responsible for Canada and the US, and I can tell you in the United States, we are seeing levels back already to 2019. What does that mean to everybody on the phone? It means tourism as a whole is moving in the right direction. And so the hotel business, the restaurant business, the attractions business, everything, it's such a ripple effect. And so I definitely see it moving in the right direction. And I am still hopeful that by the time everybody gets revaccinated and the push that we're putting on it right now, that we still could have a summer. So I think there's lots of job opportunities coming up in the not too distant future. However, this piece about resiliencies, that you know what, you're going to be disappointed. You have to kind of start the process knowing that, and you have to have the resiliency to fight through it and continue to go every single day. It's an incredibly important piece to be able to have that stamina, have that ability just to kind of hold tight and know, kind of look at it as a sales funnel. You have to have lots of leads that go into the sales funnel. And as you're talking to all of those customers about all of the leads that you have, you do know fundamentally that you're not going to get that many closures. And so looking for a job in my mind is the same way. Put as many irons in the fire as you possibly can, and then one of them will actually take. On that piece, though, I am not a fan, and I'm not an advocate in any way for just doing this willy-nilly. I think that research is an incredibly important point. Nowadays, if someone were to come into my office, and whether I was at the hotel or whether I'm in my current role, and they didn't know anything about my organization, it would be a kind of an automatic pass. Because I think today it's so easy to do research. It's so easy to go onto Google. It's so easy to go into companies' different pieces of information. It's easy to find people who know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who you know, who work at that company. There's so many ways to actually get details. And it shows the more you know, the more likely you will be engaging in a conversation. And the more you're engaging in a conversation, I think the more likely it is that you will have an opportunity to continue the conversation to the next level. But you have to do that research to make sure that you know just at least the basics about what that company is all about. And something that's a little different, I would say, in the last 5 years, maybe longer, but I would say more prevalent in the last 5 years. You also want to research if it's the company you want to work for. So it's a two-way street. There's culture, there's diversity and inclusion. There's so many pieces to that research when you're doing it, about just as much about whether you want to work there as people want to hire you. So I think it's really important to dig into that. Who will your boss be? All of those different pieces, because that's what makes your job enjoyable at the end of the day. And that's what, if there's a good fit, you can figure that out, majority of that information at the beginning. So do your research, make sure that you are aware of everything there is about that company. The other piece of the puzzle is reliability. And so what do I mean by reliable? Of course, we all think we're reliable, right? Well, I can tell you on my team, I have 8 executives who report to me. And they're all very reliable people. They are. They're great people. They're phenomenal. I have a great team. But if I need something done, if I need something specific and fast, and I'm maybe sending it to Paris, whatever that might be, there are certain people who I know will deliver for me. And so it's really important that when you're talking to whoever's interviewing you, that you have very strong stories, and I'll talk a little bit about stories in a second, but stories that say, that talk about your reliability, that talk about in a job situation, or if it hasn't been in a job situation, it's been in a family situation where you have been reliable, that you've been the one who's brought the issue, the project, the whatever across the finish line, and that you did it properly, you did it in a time-bound manner, that you did it and it had rave reviews. If you can talk about any of those sort of things where you can very sincerely articulate your reliability, I think that's an incredibly important thing. Being on time for work, these little basics are so important, and that you follow through. So this entire idea about having being reliable, knowing your strengths, making sure that you can articulate those very, very crystal clearly, to me is actually a very, very important part of the puzzle. And then this last one, second last one, I had the idea of dogmatic, but that didn't fit with my R's. And so I was trying to figure out a word that was like dogmatic, which doesn't maybe sound like a positive word, but actually, in fact, I think it is. And what I ended up coming up with to fit with my R schedule is relentless. And I thought that actually might even be better than dogmatic, because you can be relentless and dogmatic can seem a bit negative. And so what does relentless mean? It doesn't mean that you're phoning somebody every 10 seconds to find out if you had the job or not. What relentless means is that and it's a little bit like resiliency, is that you're very focused, that you know what you want to do, that you know what area you're going into. And when I say that, it could be hospitality and broad, but you know you want to get into hospitality. It could be finance and accounting. It could be sales and marketing. It could be digital. It could be whatever it is. But whatever that is that you are, that you know about that particular topic, that you are relentless in your passion for understanding it. And I think these are things that will set you apart from the general people who are out there looking for roles in today. And in this pandemic, and Kate talked about it earlier, the women have been hit harder than anybody. And so I do believe, like I said earlier, there's going to be an opportunity for that to change and for women to get back into the workplace. But I know in my own organization, daycare is one of the biggest issues right now. And so do you have a daycare? Do we take office space that we typically, people are going to come and go, it's going to be much more of a different situation. But do you put daycare in to help the women in the organization? So I think that there's going to be ways that allow for more and more women to get back in the workplace. But this idea that you need to be relentless, that you need to find a way to find your piece of the puzzle, I think is incredibly important. Then my last one, and it's 2 R's, is be real and relax. And so how many of us, and I certainly can tell you for sure I have, where we've gone to an interview, we've gone to an important meeting, we've gone to a first date, whatever that might be. And that first, 15 minutes, first of all, you have butterflies in your stomach. And then that first 10 minutes is so nerve-wracking. In fact, so nerve-wracking that sometimes, and I know in my career, I have forgotten what I even said. And so how do you stop doing that? There's 2 things I think that are incredibly good advice, or they worked for me anyway, so hopefully they'll work for you. One of them is simple. It's taking big, deep breaths. be very, very conscious of your breathing. And so to slow yourself down, to make sure that you can be yourself, that you can be real, I highly recommend that in those nerve-wracking situations, you really step back, you really say, okay, I need to do my best. I want to put my best foot forward and all of those pieces, but you need to do it in a way that is actually representing you. And so really take the time, breathe deep, and do it 5 times. I know it sounds silly. Maybe if you practice meditation, not so much, but it is a great way to really slow things down. The other thing that I think is incredibly important, and I think I would be using this public speaking is a good example of it. I can remember jobs I took where I would actually refuse to public speak. It's like, I'll do anything but public speak. And so as time went on, obviously for your career, that just doesn't work. And so I started to say, okay, you know what? That's not what I'm going to do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to practice. And so I started taking every single interview in your case. In my case, it was public speaking, and said, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to practice. And this is going to be a practice session. And I will get better and better and better as I go. And of course, it's true. You do get better and better as you go. And so just take you learn, take that opportunity to really dig in, learn from it, breathe through it so that you actually have breath as you talk, because sometimes you know how that is when you're nervous, you actually lose your breath altogether. So just take your time, be relaxed, really be yourself. And I think that is what makes for the best interviews, because then you can actually engage and you can have a great conversation and you can move through things in a much better way. So those are my 5 R's: resiliency, research, reliability, relentlessness, and be real and relax. And I think those are things, if you try to do all of those during this pandemic, I am very, very comfortable that you are going to find something. And I also believe, and I know you're all going to work really hard at it anyway, but the pandemic is moving in a new direction. I think vaccines are clearly helping the situation. And I think you're going to see more and more businesses come back. People are going to come back to office towers. Downtowns are going to begin to be much busier. And so it's just going to take time, and we need to do it properly so that we don't back ourselves up again. But I really do fundamentally believe we're on the right track. And so with that, I can absolutely take any questions or spend the next few minutes digging into any of these particular areas a little further.
Okay, thank you so much for that inspirational speech, Heather. We do have a couple questions coming through in the Q&A. I do want to take just a second to tell participants to add all their questions in the Q&A. And if you see a question that you really like that you want answered, be sure to upvote it. But we will get started. Heather, the first question comes through. There's a couple about networking, but what are your tips for networking virtually and on LinkedIn?
Right. Well, I'd argue LinkedIn's kind of virtual as it is. But so I actually, even though I'm a little older, I have jumped into LinkedIn. I think it's a incredibly important tool. And actually LinkedIn, which I really like, is actually very good at, let's say you're moderate or you get to intermediate and they give you a little rating. They actually give you tips on how to be better. And so I think it's a great tool on that particular regard. But what I think for me has really worked well is 2 things. One, pay attention to it. It's something that is out there, and this is your brand being put out there. So make sure that you're very, very comfortable with whatever you post. And the other piece that is a part of that, and it's kind of the same thing to a certain degree, is be authentic. So if you see an article that you think is very interesting and it somehow hits you in the heart some way or in the brain, post those. If you think it's something that just sounds good, but you're not that committed to it, I wouldn't post it. And so I think by posting, then more people read it. I wouldn't, and I get this a lot just because of my role. Don't just ask to be linked to everybody. In my mind, actually be a little bit more of a use your judgment on that, because and I frankly accept everybody, because I never know when I might need to hire somebody in my industry, but it is hard to keep up with it. So, and I still do my LinkedIn myself. Actually, I think it's very important to have an authentic voice. A lot of people in my team are constantly going, Heather, are you sure? But I actually feel it's very important to have that authentic voice on LinkedIn. It really does become your brand to a certain degree. I don't know if that's helpful or not, but that's my 2 cents.
Oh, great. Okay, so how do I prevent burnout while job searching / applying for jobs and not receiving any responses?
Right. That's tough. And having been a salesperson, I know it's not exactly the same thing, but I do equate the two, where you like going after and after and after things, but you don't get any response. This is where tenacity, resiliency, in my mind, really comes in, and being relentless, because you just have to keep at it. If there's any way, though, and this is not always easy in today's environment, particularly with the pandemic, but if there is any way that you can get in front of people, and so that's the networking side of it. So talk to your friends, get your friends to talk to their parents, talk to their friends. Find a way to make a connection within that organization. That's not easy all the time, but there usually is a way, because it's, 6 degrees of separation. There's ways to figure that out, because oftentimes if somebody can get your name in front of somebody, it makes such a difference. And so spend as much time on that networking, trying to figure out who knows who, as it is just keeping at it and keeping applying for the various different roles.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There are a lot of questions about gaps in resumes, so I definitely want to make sure we cover this. Okay. With the pandemic, obviously everyone has gaps. So how do you effectively explain gaps between jobs, or how do you fit it onto your resume or cover letter?
Right. Probably 15 years ago, I would have said gaps were a problem. Today, with the environment that we work in, which is actually kind of unfortunate, and we all try not to have these situations, but with the ups and downs, with the different crises we've had, a lot of times people unfortunately get laid off. In Canada, thank goodness for our system, we have a little bit of a softer fall for people, but in general, the gaps are not, I wouldn't say normal, but they're much more acceptable. So I wouldn't worry about it from that perspective. What I would worry about it from is, what did you do during that time? So did you use the time to get further educated, to learn a new skill, to do something? And that's what I would talk about when you had the gap. If you went to the beach every day and you have a great tan, this is good too. But generally speaking, for people with gaps, I want to know what they did with the time. It's not so much that they have a gap.
Okay. Great. And with everything being virtual as this conference is right now, what types of online presence do you think looks best to employers?
Well, I mean, we all know about Facebook and Instagram and all of those different things, and being careful, because for sure people look that sort of thing up. But I think it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about your brand and about what you post on LinkedIn. LinkedIn to me is a professional network. And so just make sure that whatever's there is authentic to you. I think people are looking to understand who you are, and you can't in today's world. And so being authentic is important, but worse still, it's so transparent if you're not. And so that just undermines you. So just find the things that make sense to you and that you are passionate about. And those are the things that I would be posting. Those are the areas that I would dig into. Like DEI is a very good example. For me, and being a woman leader, it's a very, very important topic to me, but I'm very careful of what I post, because I can't go across the board. I really try and keep it into my swim lane and expand it in a way that is respectful. And so you just can't, I think that's an incredibly important part of it all, is that you think through who your readers are and what they're seeing, and take it from that perspective as much as you need to consider all your stakeholders when you're thinking through those pieces.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what tips would you give the participants on the workshop today about breaking out of their current industry and trying something new?
I think if you want to do that, you have to be incredibly aware of your skills. And so I often transfer people. We had a general manager in our property in the Empress, and she's just become our SVP of technology. Why did I make her, convince her really to make that move? It's because of her skill set. And so if you're looking to do something like that and change disciplines, change industries, make sure you're completely aware of your strengths and can talk through those, because it goes back to my research point. Research where you want to go, look at those transferable skills, and put together examples of why you would be very good in this new and particular area. It really is painting the picture for the employer on why you make sense.
Great. Okay. And there are a couple questions just about job descriptions and how to fit. So how do you know when a job is a fit for you when looking at the job description? Well,
frankly, I think it's hard. I think that it is, but It depends. Well, it's so difficult because it depends on what job it is we're talking about, right? And so, and this is a tip for all women because, and men too, I suppose, to some degree, but I think it's more particular to women. We look to the job description, and then we want, if there's 10 things that they're asking for in terms of what you need to know in terms of skills or applicability. If we don't have all 10, we're like, oh, well, we're not qualified for that job. And I have to tell you, I have so many men apply for jobs and it's like, are you qualified for any of this? Because men have and it's not a negative by any stretch. This is just how our DNA works. It's our, whatever it is within each, men and women. Women like to have all the dots, all the T's crossed and I's dotted, and men don't. And so men often have more chance, and then they sell themselves during the interview. So even if you don't have everything, and it looks like it makes sense for you, and it looks like those pieces of the puzzle, maybe you're missing a couple, we're all very smart. We all can figure things out. You put a little elbow grease behind things, you can generally figure it out. And so I firmly believe still apply for it. If it sounds like it's something that's interesting to you, take the time and apply for it, because I think that 9 times out of 10, you'll actually be qualified for the job.
Okay, great. We have time for one more question before we wrap up. But what advice would the Heather of yesterday give the Heather of today?
Oh, so many. But if there's one piece of advice I probably would have done, and I try to do this to this very day, but it is slow down and smell the roses. I am a driver. I like to get things done. I like to move things forward. I like to hit my goals. And sometimes that can actually, you can have blinders on. And so for me, the one thing, my advice I would give to myself today is just slow down a little bit, enjoy the ride, and it's topical right now, but I think it's really, really important, is mental health. This pandemic has been very difficult on mental health. It's been very difficult on women in particular for mental health because of the family and the additional work and being at home and all the things that we all know. So taking that time to spend a little me time, I think is incredibly important. Frank, it's not even important. I think it's necessary in order to make sure that you can navigate through everything that's happening right now. And you just need that time, kind of like I was talking about earlier, to breathe and to step back from it all. I also believe you have a different perspective when you do that. And it's a better perspective often.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Heather, for answering these questions and being with us today. Even though we can't be in person, thank you for taking the time virtually with us.
Yes, thank you very much for having me. And good luck, everybody, and good luck with your job search. All right, have a great day.
Thank you so much, Heather. We are so grateful to have you joining us today. We appreciate your candor, your honesty, and all of your intelligence and thoughtful words. I am now honored to introduce the Toronto Mayor, John Tory, to give his opening address.
Hello, Mayor John Tory here, and welcome to the Dress for Success virtual event, which is called Mastering Your Job Search During the Pandemic. I extend my warmest wishes to all of the attendees, as well as great thanks to Dress for Success for putting together this important event. And I want to thank as well the local companies sponsoring the event and sharing their valued expertise and insights and resources. We couldn't do it without you. As we come together virtually, please as well accept my utmost gratitude for all the sacrifices and the flexibility that this past year has required of all of us in the interests of public health. I know it's been an incredibly difficult year, fraught with challenges, especially for women in the workforce and on the hunt for a job. COVID has deeply impacted the job market, but Toronto is still a city with boundless opportunities. You probably hear me talk about how bullish I am on our future, and that's because all the smart people, all the great schools, all the great companies, all the great opportunities, the immigration that will come our way again, these things are all still going to be a reality and create those boundless opportunities. So I hope that you have hope that as the vaccines roll themselves out and we follow public health, that all the raw materials that made Toronto one of the fastest growing cities in North America are still with us and will pay dividends going forward. We're taking actions at the city to support residents, but it's organizations like Dress for Success that are doing such important work in the field and on the ground, helping people directly and individually. Events such as the ones this week epitomize the importance of this work. Over the course of the week, there will be workshops covering topics centered on tackling the job search through what are undoubtedly unprecedented times. And all of these workshops will be tailored for women engaged in that search, cognizant of the unique experiences and some of the difficulties, the distinctive difficulties faced by women throughout the pandemic and, for that matter, before. Job losses among women have been profound, and even as many women return to work, they're having difficulty recovering their hours. And these trends mean real changes for the trajectory of women's lives, and that means the lives of their families as well. And I really hope, I'm sure it's the case, that these workshops will provide practical and tangible tools to help gain and secure employment and all of the benefits that come with that, including greater financial security. I promise you that I am going to be doing everything in my power as mayor, together with the city government, to create more opportunities for residents. That means creating new jobs, or fostering the creation of new jobs, fostering new industries and investments in Toronto, attracting global employers to set up shop in our city. I'm doing that every single day so that Torontonians will get the benefit of those investments and of those jobs. So with that, I wish you all the best in these workshops. I have no doubt that you will gain valuable insights and connections and be empowered with the tools and the skills to tackle all of the opportunities that do lie ahead of you and lie ahead of our great city. Thank you very much.